Part 102. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1013. Brother Joao sat anxiously in the flower hall of the front yard, looked outside again and again, and was disappointed again. Just when Joao was thinking about taking his leave and leaving, there was the sound of running outside, and he turned his head to see Hutu and Chi Wensu holding hands. He ran in holding hands, and the little lion and Xiaoan followed closely behind. Xiaoxiang and Xiaoan walked behind slowly, and when they stepped into the threshold, they heard Hutu excitedly say, "Joao, I heard that you have turned your back on the dark and turned to the bright." Joao had never heard of this idiom, and was a little confused, so Xiaobao pushed the tiger's head away, and smiled at Joao. "I heard that you and your brother are going to live in Daki." "Yes," Joao smiled wryly, "you know that if I go back, I will definitely be sent away. Either I will still go on a mission to other countries, or I will be sent to the battlefield. I like Daki very much and I like to be friends with you. So it's better to stay here." Little Bear snorted, and said, "Aren't you planning to break up with us? You beat my younger brother, and I haven't settled the score with you yet. Xiaoan and the others are the ones who want to break up the friendship, but they have forgiven us now. A few days ago, they took medicinal wine to visit me and wiped the medicine for me. Otherwise, I would not be able to get out of bed today. We have become friends again." Ruo looking eagerly at the little bear, "If you're still angry, then I'll let you beat me up." Xiaoan coughed lightly, and stretched out her small hand to tug on the corner of Xiaoxiang's clothes. They had already taught Joao a lesson, but the other party obviously didn't notice it, and was grateful to them. Even so, they couldn't do it too much. But Little Bear was still a little angry. His 4 younger brothers were all beaten up, especially Hutu and Little Lion. He snorted coldly and said, "I won't bully you either. Will you be sent to the battlefield when you go back? Then you should know martial arts, and then we will compare whether it is my Daki's martial arts or your Portuguese martial arts." Thinking of the supernatural power of the little bear, the children gave Joao a sympathetic look. Joao, however, thought that he was much older than Xiaoxiang, and he still took advantage of him, so he felt a little embarrassed. Xiaoan invited the 2 of them to the backyard for dinner. "My 4th aunt wants to see you too." Ruoang and Ruos became even more nervous. They just stabbed their sons not long ago. I heard that the princess hurts the children. I wonder if they would embarrass if they went to the backyard. The 2 of them were pushed to the backyard by a few friends in a nervous mood, but they met 2 young women who were full of smiles. Han people age slowly, especially Mu Yangling and Xiao Xia, who are well maintained. Among Western women, they look like girls in their teens. The stunned man shouted directly, "Joao, why are you 2 hands and feet together?" Ruoang was even more hands and feet together. He didn't dare to shake his hands for a while, and walked forward directly. Xiao Xia directly burst out laughing, and Mu Yangling couldn't help but pursed his lips into a smile. Although there were disputes between the 2 sides, parents can never settle accounts with each other's children when their children fight. Therefore, Mu Yangling and Xiao Xia are still friendly to the Joao brothers. When they heard that they were going to live in Daki, they asked, "What about you? Do you want to continue living in the guild hall, or rent a house outside?" Joao hesitated, and said, "The accommodation in the guild hall is too expensive. I plan to rent a yard, and I may need your help at that time." Mu Yangling knew that what he was talking about was the issue of proof. Foreigners could live in guild halls or inns in Guangzhou, but if they wanted to rent or buy a house, they needed a certificate issued by the yamen. "Mother, you can help them. It's so easy for them to abandon evil and do good. We must treat them well and let them go further and further on the road of kindness." The little lion looked at Mu Yangling with a serious face and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? Joao is still a child like you, so what's wrong?" Hutu shouted, "It's you who said they invaded Luzon. The invaders are bad people." Brother Joao bowed his head. Mu Yangling said, it was the Portuguese and Spanish explorers who invaded Luzon, not the Joao brothers. They did not invade Luzon. You can't blame everyone just because some citizens of their country did something wrong. For example, a Daki man went to Portugal to steal something, and then Joao said that you Daki people are all thieves, you are also a thief, and you are a bad person, are you convinced? Huda shook his head hurriedly. Mu Yangling touched his head and said to the children, it's the same reason. Xiaoan tilted his head and asked, then why did the fourth uncle get angry with the envoys of the two countries because Portuguese and Spanish explorers invaded Luzon? It's not the envoys who invaded Luzon. Xiao looked at him fiercely, don't talk nonsense, how can you say such things in front of outsiders? Xiaoan pouted unconvinced, and Mu Yangling patted Xiao's hand, glanced at brother Joao, and said apologetically, I'm really sorry, the children spoiled us, please forgive me for any offense. Joao shook his head, saluted and said, dear princess, I actually have many questions, but I can't get the answers I want from the envoy. I also need you, the wise one, to answer me, so please answer Xiaoan's questions. Well, as you said, it's not our brothers who invaded Luzon, isn't it? We are ashamed of their actions, but we should not avoid them. Mu Yangling was slightly surprised, and only then did he understand why Xiaoan and Xiaoxiang hated brother Joao so much at first, but they became friends with them in the end. If they had such a heart, it would be understandable. Mu Yangling thought for a while and said, Joao, do you know Pedro's identity? Joao blushed, hesitated for a moment or nodded, he is the Count of our Portugal. Yes, he is the Count of Portugal. This is not a secret among foreigners in Guangzhou, so we also know that most of the property he robbed here will be sent back to your motherland, so you think it is his right to be a pirate here? Personal behavior. Mu Yangling looked at the children standing below one by one, and seeing that they were listening carefully, he continued, no, he is supported by your king and your country, and his actions represent your motherland. Like the invasion of Luzon, the Portuguese adventurers who landed on Luzon also had an official background. In their words, they were expanding the territory of their country, but they only drove to the territory of other countries. Mu Yangling said, and your envoys have been apologizing for them, which proves our conjecture, so the invasion of Luzon is not an act of an individual or a private group, but an act of the state. The prince hates the Portuguese envoys, this is the principle of the minister, but you are different from Lingdi, you are still children, as long as you don't do things that harm Daki's interests, we will not hate you and become enemies with you. But that is Luzon, not Daki. Joao hesitated for a moment, but said, your envoy said that your lord sent troops to Luzon for the same idea as ours, so you are also invaders. You are talking nonsense. Huda jumped up excitedly, my father is not a bad person, he went to help Luzon, to drive those villains in your country out of Luzon. The little lion also clenched his fists and glared at Joao, as if he wanted to punch his father if he slandered his father again. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1014. Although Joao's face turned red, he still looked at Mu Yangling persistently. It was undeniable that he agreed with the envoy's point of view, because he didn't think that the Prince of Daki was so kind and would help Lu Song for free. Of course, Chi Heiran would not be so kind as to help Luzon for free, he was paid, Luzon's gold and silver mines. But looking at the angry tiger head, the little lion, and the raging anger in the little bear's eyes, Mu Yangling was not stupid enough to tell them this, but smiled confidently and said to Joao, Viscount Joao, do you know the relationship between Lu Song and Dachi? Joao remembered what Hutu and the others had yelled, and said, Luzon is a vassal state of Daki. Mu Yangling nodded, then do you know what a country is? Joao was silent, of course he knew, just like their country was in the Austro-Hungarian Empire 100 years ago, Dachi was the upper country, and Luzon was the vassal country. If you are invading India and other stewards that have nothing to do with Ardaki will not intervene. At most, we can say a fair word for India and condemn you, just like what England is doing in India now. How did Dachi ever say that? But Lusong is different. Lusong is a vassal state of my Dachi, and the king of Lusong asked Dachi for help. As long as our Dachi has the ability, we will naturally help. This is the reason why the prince sent troops. Before dispatching troops, the prince also sent weapons and food to Luzon for support, and Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang have also been donating money and materials to help the children and women in Luzon who have been affected by the war. Mu Yangling herself has been through wars and knows how pitiful children and women are in wars. She sighed, "Children, evil cannot suppress justice. It is only a matter of time, and aggression is always the worst evil. People with backbone and flesh and blood will not surrender to the invaders. Even if they have to sacrifice their blood and soul, they will persist in resisting until their homeland is saved. This may be contrary to the education you have received since childhood, but I hope you can seriously think about it yourself. I have always believed that human nature is good, and I hope you can return to kindness." Looking at Mu Yangling with gentle eyes, Joao felt ashamed. I shouldn't have misunderstood the prince like that." Mu Yangling smiled and didn't mind at all. "Just talk about the misunderstanding." The three little Xiong brothers looked at him proudly. "My father will never be a bad person." Mu Yangling asked them to take brother Joao to play in the garden. "We will eat when your father comes back." The tiger head and the little lion grabbed Joao from left to right, and told him how kind their father was. Even if they met beggars on the street, they would give some coins. How could such a good man invade other countries? Seeing the children walking away, Xiao Xia asked worriedly, "Aling, fourth uncle really doesn't intend to take down Luzon? If fourth uncle takes down Luzon in the future, won't the children be disappointed?" Mu Yangling smiled and said, "Sister-in-law, don't worry, Heiran won't take down Lusong. If you don't believe me, go back and ask your cousin, he will definitely disdain Lusong. In their eyes, Luzon is a barren land separated by an ocean. If the two countries did not know each other by chance in Tang dynasty, and the king of Luzon asked him to be a vassal state, they would not know what lies beyond the ocean. And this land, in their view, is there anything in the Central Plains that is so vast and abundant that it is worth occupying Luzon? In fact, Mu Yangling agrees with this point very much. China is already big enough and rich in products. It may not be a good thing to increase its territory. The most important thing is that aggression is never the best policy. She doesn't like war, especially this kind of aggression, war against aggression. Xiao Xia is dubious. She is not a few children. She thinks that Chi Heiran is a good person. A good person can be a great general, can lead the three armies. Then why did the fourth uncle agree to send troops to help? Mu Yangling coughed lightly, and said in a low voice, "He has made an agreement with the king of Luzon. He will send troops there, and Luzon will give them a piece of land to develop minerals for them." Xiao Xia understood that this was the reward for sending troops. The king of Luzon is willing. Forced. Mu Yangling sighed. That's why Dachi has to become stronger so that he won't fall into this situation. Xiao Xia was startled. "You were forced by my fourth uncle." Mu Yangling was embarrassed. How cruel Chi Heiran was in Xiao Xia's heart. She said, "It was forced by the Spanish and Portuguese. Lusong is not far from Guangzhou, and letters can be sent back every now and then, so Chi Heiran is very well informed." Chi Heiran's study is always open to Mu Yangling. Chi Heiran would also talk to Mu Yangling if she was interested, so she knew about it. Chi Heiran was going to the gold and silver mines in Luzon, so he ordered Jojo to ask the people from the Ministry of Industry to investigate the mines after he landed. But the place is so big, they only know the approximate range. Where can they find it? In the end, the mineral was not found, but encountered several foreigners. The foreigners massacred the tribal villagers, which undoubtedly angered Jojo and others. Luzon is a vassal state of Daki, and they still have black eyes and black hair like the Han people. When the Han people immigrated to Luzon, especially after the Forbidden Sea, the fishermen had no way to survive. Many people settled in Luzon on small wooden boats and made a living along the coast. Similarly, the culture and Chinese language of the Han people were also brought to Luzon. The nearby tribes can more or less speak Chinese. When they saw Jojo and others, they immediately asked for help in Chinese. Jojo had originally brought troops to rescue them, but what the foreigners did angered them again. Without even thinking about it, Jojo led people to fight with the foreigners, and the matter soon spread to the king of Luzon. The king of Luzon was originally worried that Daki was also planning to do something wrong, but he saw that Jojo and others only saved people and fought against foreigners, and did not occupy land. Although the king of Luzon was still a little apprehensive, he was very happy. The foreigners who came ashore were really abominable. If the tribal people did not submit to them, they would kill people. If they submitted, they would force people to do coolies. In just half a year, time has taken up a lot of space, and it has caused complaints. If the chaos is not settled, the country will also be in chaos. King Luzon didn't know what Daki wanted, but Daki was a superior country, so it was better than foreigners who were greedy like evil spirits, so King Luzon personally sent envoys with letters to find Chi-Heiran, thanking him for extending to help. On the one hand, he hinted at what he wanted: as long as Lusong could get it, Lusong would definitely pay tribute. Chi-Heiran saw that Jojo couldn't find the gold mine for a long time, and felt that he couldn't search all over the sky like this, so he directly proposed to the king of Luzon that he help them deal with the foreigners. If he wanted to give them mining rights to mines, he didn't want much, just the 10-year mining rights to the area that was said to have gold and silver mines. The king of Luzon first asked the Ministry of Industry and the Ministry of Households to inquire, and confirmed that there were 2 silver mines in that area. He was a little reluctant, so he didn't agree. But as soon as Jojo and the others stopped moving, the foreigners counterattacked frantically, and captured their 3 larger tribes in one breath. The firearms were too powerful, and they could shoot people from a distance. Song was very passive, and out of helplessness, King Lusong agreed to Chi-Heiran's request. Therefore, mining has also changed from private to public, and it is legal. That's why Mu Yangling said that King Luzon was forced. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1015. Mu Yangling helped brother Zhou rent a house in Guangzhou City, and the 2 of them stayed like this. Once the envoy fleet left, they had no mission and were free instead. Seeing Hudu, they spent most of their daily life on the house. Zhou expressed his interest in Chinese culture, so he made an exchange with the children. Later, his brothers would study with them, and he would teach them what he had learned from elementary school, and the languages of other countries he can speak. Mu Yangling also joined in the fun and became a college student once, and he was the college student with the slowest learning progress. What surprised Mu Yangling was that in terms of language learning, the most talented people were Tiger Head and Little Lion. Hearing and being able to speak made Mu Yangling jealous. Therefore, Mu Yangling studied with the children during the day, and had to let the children teach it again at night, so as not to fail to keep up with the progress. The Tiger Head and the Little Lion were in a hurry. Seeing that their mother hadn't remembered it after teaching it several times, they stomped their feet and shouted, "Mother, why are you so stupid? Brother Zioan will teach you tomorrow, we can't teach you anymore." Mu Yangling admitted his mistake. "I'm a bit slow in learning, please repeat the few words just now, I'll practice hard at night." Chi-Heiran, who was still smiling and watching, turned cold, and pulled the 2 sons to him, scolding, "Did you talk to your mother like this? When did your mother and I dislike you when you were slow to learn? You are disgusted with us now, go away and face the wall. With tears in their eyes, the two children lowered their heads and did not dare to speak. Mu Yangling immediately stood up and waited aside. Chi Heiran carried the two boys to the wall, and said, "When will you know what's wrong and when will it end?" As soon as Chi Heiran turned around, the two children followed behind his butt with their heads down. Chi Heiran just let out an angry hey, and the two children rushed to Mu Yangling to admit their mistake. One said, "Mom, I know I was wrong, I shouldn't dislike you for slow learning, I will teach you patiently in the future." The other also said in frustration, "Mother, we shouldn't be in such a hurry, please forgive us." Chi Heiran's expression turned pale. When sleeping at night, Chi Heiran hugged Mu Yangling and complained, "It's okay for you to learn foreign languages from them, as long as you know the languages of Dajin and Xixia. Idle is idle, and it won't hurt to learn more." Mu Yangling said, "Don't look at these two boys in a hurry, sometimes they are very patient. Bear taught me for 2 days, and now I won't come any more. I run out with Xiao Bao every day after dinner, I don't know what the two of them are doing together in the study. Xiaoan is patient enough, I used to come over after dinner to play with the tiger-headed little lion for a while before going back to sleep. As a result, he took Wendy to his side, and he didn't come over after dinner, and they all disliked me for being slow, so the tiger head and the little lion still stood firm." Chi Heiran's face became even darker, and he gritted his teeth and said, "Little bear, the older he gets, the more he will become unbecoming. Don't be sad. I'll beat him up for you tomorrow." Mu Yangling smiled and said, "Don't beat me up, what a big deal, and I think he does have something to do. Aren't you and Zijin taking Xiaobao to investigate politics? It's impossible not to follow Xiao Xiang. They have to study again, Xiao Xiang also needs to practice martial arts, and their school needs to be taken care of, so they are busy. Then you can't dislike you. You have worked so hard to raise them, and now it's just a little thing. Can you expect them to be filial to you in the future? It's enough for me to have you." Mu Yangling propped up his body, looked at him with a smile and said, "When we get old, we don't care about them, build a nicer courtyard and move in, and study when we are happy. Practice the sword, let's go around to play when we are not happy, and when we are too old to walk, there are servants around us to take care of us, so we don't need them. There are always times when servants are negligent. With you, the Devil King, who dares to neglect us, Chi Heiran has a lot of prestige. He is obviously a peaceful person at home, but when the servants see him, they are silent as if they saw something. Even Guyu, who has always been bold, is cautious." Chi Heiran hugged Mu Yangling into his arms, and said wistfully, "Then what if the master is gone?" Mu Yangling was taken aback, "Why aren't you here? It's not like you live forever. If you die, you won't be here. It will be so hard to be left alone in another courtyard. With the children by your side, you won't be lonely. They are impatient with us now. I still count on you. Will they be filial when they grow up? So this matter cannot be used to them. Maybe I died earlier than you, and you are the one left behind." Chi Heiran raised his eyebrows, "How could you die earlier than master? With master here, who can make you die?" Mu Yangling's eyes became hot, and he buried his head in front of his chest, and said after a while, "Why don't we die together?" Chi Heiran paused for a while before saying, "I don't like the idea of burial, so you have to live well, you haven't enjoyed the blessings of your children and grandchildren yet." Mu Yangling stopped talking and just leaned against his chest quietly. Chi Heiran was a little worried, hugged her and said, "Don't be foolish." Mu Yangling smiled, and said stiffly, "If you don't want me to mess around, just work hard and die later than me." Chi Heiran didn't speak, but held her hand tightly. The next day, before Mu Yangling got up, Chi Heiran caught the little bear and beat him up. This time, he beat him firmly. The little bear howled so much that both houses shook, and Mu Yangling got up from the bed in fright. The little lion and the tiger had touched their buttocks with their hands behind their backs and watched their elder brother being beaten in fear. They felt that it was too lenient for their father to punish them for facing the wall last night. The little bear was pressed down on the bench by Chi Heiran and spanked, howling in pain. Xiaobao asked the twins in a daze, "What's wrong with the little bear? Brother Xiaoxiang has been with him for the past few days, what could he do?" The little lion said, "Brother is not filial." Hutu added, "We were also punished last night, but we were a little more filial than the eldest brother, so we were only punished to face the wall." Xiaobao frowned, and asked, "Why is little bear so unfilial? He hasn't done anything to offend fourth uncle recently." The twins looked at the elder brother sympathetically, and said in unison, "He refuses to teach my mother the foreign language." Xiaobao closed his mouth and murmured after a long time, "Is this also unfilial?" The little lion and the tiger nodded at the same time, "This is unfilial." The unfilial little bear didn't know the reason for his beating from his younger brothers until after he was beaten. Little bear couldn't help but beat the ground. "Didn't you teach mother?" The twins looked at the elder brother with round eyes, trying to dispel his grief and anger. Little Xiong sighed, lay down on the couch and said, "Forget it, I'll teach tonight." Hutu looked left and right, leaned close to the elder brother's ear and whispered, "Mother is a little stupid, you have to be patient, otherwise you will be unfilial and you will be beaten by your father." Little bear finds life more difficult. The reborn wife is farming. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 1016. After the Double Ninth Festival, Qi Xiaoyuan wrote a letter to inform Xiaobao that they were packing up and going back to Beijing. Little Treasure didn't make a fuss, and obediently started preparing gifts to bring back to Beijing. This surprised Qi Heiran, who was on guard. When he asked, it turned out that this kid was also homesick. Qi Heiran was funny, patted his head and said, "In the future, fourth uncle will pick you up to play when he is free." Xiaobao's eyes lit up, "Fourth uncle wants to keep his word." Qi Heiran nodded. Although Xiaobao lost a lot of schoolwork after arriving in Guangdong, he also learned a lot of things that he couldn't learn in the capital. He couldn't tell which education method was better, and they still had to explore. Let Xiaobao go out of Beijing for 3 months to practice. As for where to go, it depends on the situation. While risky, it's great for a child's development. Xiaobao happily packed his luggage, while the second prince sat on the small bed with his head down, not wanting to move. When Hutu came to pull him to sleep, he saw that he was sleepy, so he asked, "What's wrong with you?" Qi Wensu lowered his head and did not speak. Hutu scratched his head anxiously. Since Qi Wensu came, he was not the youngest and most stupid in the family. He followed everything with a little head, just like brother Zioan led them, so Hutu I like Qi Wensu very much. The little lion looked at Qi Wensu seriously, bit the tiger's ear and said, "He doesn't want to go back to the capital." "Then I won't go back." With a wave of Hutu's little hand, he took Qi Wensu's little hand and said, "If you don't want to go back, don't go back. Sleep with me, and I will give you half of my bed." "Is it really possible?" Qi Wensu looked at them with wet eyes. Hutio nodded without thinking, "It's definitely possible." The little lion said, "I have to ask Uncle Huang, don't you miss your parents if you don't go home? What if Uncle Huang misses you?" Qi Wensu lowered his head deeply, and the atmosphere among the 3 children fell silent. After a long time, Qi Wensu said in a low voice, "I want my fourth uncle to be my father and my fourth aunt to be my mother, is that okay?" "No," the little lion and the tiger had said in unison, looking at him warily together, "Your father is Uncle Huang, our parents cannot give it to you." Qi Wensu sniffed, looked at the two with tears in his eyes, turned around and ran back to his small room, climbed into bed and covered his head with the quilt. The tiger head and the little lion glanced at each other, scratched their heads, and became a little at a loss. "Is it because Uncle Huang is not good, so the second cousin doesn't want to be his son. The little lion nodded fiercely and agreed, it must be. The two brothers looked at the inner room sympathetically, not knowing what to do. Why don't you ask brother Xiaoan? Xiaoan was immersed in his studies, and while reading, he listened to two friends explain the whole story. He turned a page of the book and said, then you just leave Wensu there who is still crying. The two brothers opened their mouths wide and looked at each other with a bad premonition in their hearts. Xiaoan sighed like an adult, closed the textbook, and said, let's go and see Wensu, he doesn't know how he is crying now. Chi Wensu drenched the quilt from crying, and when the tiger head tore off the quilt covering his head, his face was covered with tears, and he was looking at the three of them with red and swollen eyes. Xiaoan pulled him up, patted him on the shoulder and coaxed him, don't cry, if you want to stay, you need Uncle Wang's consent, crying is useless. But Emperor Father won't agree, he didn't agree to elder brother to stay, let alone agree to me to stay. Brother Xiaobao is different from you. Although the adults never said these things in front of them, Xiaoan already vaguely understood that Uncle Huang did not allow brother Xiaobao to come and play with them, not because Guangzhou was far away, nor was it because of Uncle Huang reluctant, but because of brother Xiaobao's status as the prince. He comforted Chi Wensu, you are not the prince, Uncle Huang will probably agree. Chi Wensu asked with a twitch, really? Let's try it, Xiaoan said in a very bachelor way, anyway, there is still half a month before the departure, let's write him a letter first, 1 letter a day, and pester him until he agrees. Anyway, I use Brother Bear's letter carrier pigeon. The little lion worried unnecessarily, will the carrier pigeon get tired and thin? Huda patted his chest and said, don't worry, I'll feed them a little more tomorrow, and they won't lose weight for sure. So the 4 children studied ink and spread paper, thinking about writing letters. Chi Wensu had already recognized a lot of characters and clamored to write by himself, but he didn't know how to write when he picked up the pen. The 3 older children are very experienced. They often have to persuade their parents to do something, so they have accumulated a lot of experience. Xiaoan said, you have to express your urgent desire to stay here. The little lion said, you have to tell Uncle Huang why you don't want to go back to Beijing and why you want to stay here. Huda said, you have to tell Uncle Huang that if you are forced to return to Beijing, you will be unhappy, unable to eat, unable to sleep, unable to study, and sad and sick. In short, write whatever you want. Xiaoan and Little Lion nodded, you can use some exaggerated brushwork appropriately, and you must impress Uncle Huang, so that you can achieve your goal. The second prince bit his pen and thought for a while before writing. He wanted to stay here because he was very happy here. He wanted his 4th uncle to be his father and his 4th aunt his mother. Play together, study together, he doesn't want to go back to the capital. The maids and eunuchs look at him very strangely, mother and concubine cry whenever they see him, either to make him be careful of the prince's brother, or to let him drag the father to her palace. No, he would be scolded and slapped if he obeyed. He didn't like it at all. Here, the tiger-head brothers can always play with him all the time, but in the palace, the prince brother can only take them to play after class. At other times, he is either alone, or is being pressured by his mother and concubine to study. Dislike. If he was really taken back, he would die of grief, crying as many tears as sea water. Seeing that he finished writing, Xiaoan and the 3 came over to read it. Chi Wensu hurriedly hid the letter behind his back, and shyly said, you are not allowed to read it. We'll help you refer to it. The 3 children looked at the letter in his hand excitedly, maybe I can give you some advice. Chi Wensu dried the letter, put it away, and said solemnly, the letter was written according to your suggestion, so there is no need to give any comments. I think I wrote it very well. He was afraid that Brother Hudu and Little Lion would be angry when they saw that he had written to let his 4th uncle and aunt be his parents, so he didn't show anything to anyone. The 3 sighed regretfully. Although they wanted to read it very much, they expressed their respect for Qi Wensu. They looked at the letter eagerly for the last time and said, "Okay then, let's go to my brother to ask for pigeons." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1017. Qi Ziyuan was very sad when he read the letter. He thought he was responsible as a father. No matter how busy the government affairs were, he would spare some time to spend with the children every day, and even took the children out of the palace every once in a while. Walking around, not to mention comparing the emperors of the past dynasties, even the princes and ministers of the same generation, he also considers himself not inferior in being a father. But his son didn't want to be his son. Qi Ziyuan was very sad. He thought, did he neglect Xiao Er before, did he suffer too much harm? And no, even his mother and concubine Zhao concubine kept rushing towards death, and he just grounded her, trying not to let her affairs affect his young son's heart. But the son didn't seem to appreciate it. Xiao Er is like this, what about Xiaobao, that kid is also running to Guangzhou, does he also want to be the son of the fourth son, and not mine? Qi Heiran held the letter with an ugly expression on his face, and sat in the imperial study room without moving. Eunuch Wan sensed something was wrong. Seeing that the emperor was motionless, he could only retreat cautiously, recruited his apprentice, and whispered, "Quickly go to Cunning Palace to ask the queen to come." At first glance, the carrier pigeon belonged to His Royal Highness the Crown Prince and the Prince of Rongjun. Maybe they had caused some trouble to make the emperor sad. Let the queen solve this kind of matter. The emperor didn't get angry, but just sat very quietly. Compared with Emperor Jinjian in the previous dynasty, he was much more pampered, but Eunuch Wan was still trembling with fear, for fear of taking a wrong step. The queen came very quickly, and Eunuch Wan heaved a sigh of relief, and hurried in to report, "Your Majesty, the Empress is begging to see you." Qi Ziyuan slowly folded the letter paper and said, "Let her in." Li Jinghua came in and was relieved to see Qi Ziyuan's expression was not good, but he was still calm, and after Eunuch Wan stepped back, he walked behind him and rubbed his shoulders, asking, "Your Majesty, did Xiaobao cause trouble again?" "Wan Lai informed you, right? The emperor seldom gets angry. He is also worried about you. Besides, I am also afraid that Xiaobao will cause some trouble in Guangzhou. In the past few months since he left, I haven't had a few peaceful sleeps." Qi Ziyuan took her hand and sighed, "Don't worry about him. If he worries every time he goes out, when will he be worried?" Li Jinghua was puzzled, "Your Majesty." Qi Ziyuan patted her hand and asked, "Zitong, do you think my father is a failure? The children all want to recognize someone else as their father." "Your Majesty," Li Jinghua pouted her lips angrily, "don't underestimate yourself. Xiaobao and the other princes are all proud of you. How can you think of someone else as your father?" Qi Ziyuan smiled wryly, "Of course I wouldn't have thought about it before, but now." Qi Ziyuan hesitated for a moment before showing Xiao Er's letter to Li Jinghua. Li Jinghua saw that the handwriting on it was ugly and big, and the words were childish, so she couldn't help laughing. "Your Majesty, there are always infinity in children's expressions, and the thoughts in their hearts are individual and not comprehensive. Be the son of the fourth uncle, but want to be the son of Aling, and want to live in the atmosphere of the fourth uncle's house. If you don't believe me, ask carefully." Li Jinghua lowered her head and thought for a while, then continued, "Although what I said is suspected of hurting concubine Zhao, since I have said this today, my concubine has opened up and said that the emperor is naturally good to Xiao Er, and I can do it too to fulfill the responsibility of the aunt's mother. Let their brothers live in peace, but Zhao concubine is his mother and concubine after all, and Xiao Er spends most of his time with his mother and concubine, and even most of the people who serve him are arranged by Zhao concubine. Children are the most sensitive, although they don't understand the struggle of adults, they can feel the atmosphere, even if you can restrain concubine Zhao's feet and everyone's mouth, but can you restrain their thoughts? Even if they don't say anything, they believe in their hearts that Xiao has no mother and concubines backing, and they will inevitably be negligent in their actions, Li Jinghua said here, also very helpless. This is where the concubine can't compare with Aling. Regardless of concubine, no matter how you manage your body, the harem will always be a mixed bag, but the palace managed by Aling is much simpler. The slave will do what the master tells you to do. You can see that the two houses have lived next to each other for many years. The two houses are like one family and two families, but there have been no conflicts, and the strangest thing is that the servants of the two governments often cross orders and have never shown any fighting spirit. Therefore, Xiao may not like you as his father, but he doesn't like our palace, but likes his fourth and take care of the house. Seeing that Qi Xiaoyuan listened, Li Jinghua continued, Your Majesty, why don't you ask him? If you don't believe me, then ask Xiaobao to see if he is willing to be your son or fourth uncle. Qi Xiaoyuan's heart agitated. He really wanted to ask, otherwise it might be difficult to fall asleep in the future. Qi Xiaoyuan did it when he thought of it, and asked Li Jinghua to go back to bed first and then write letters to his two sons separately. Considering that Xiao is still young, the language is as easy to understand as possible. Xiaobao was puzzled when he received the letter, but he still replied. His father was his father, and his fourth uncle was his fourth uncle. Why did he want his fourth uncle to be his father? He has a father himself. Xiaobao held his pen and thought for a while, but he still couldn't figure out why his father would ask this question, so he asked curiously, why would father ask such a question? But Qi Wensu had a lot to struggle with. He propped his chin and thought for a long time, and finally came to the conclusion that he also likes his father and fourth uncle as his father. He wants two fathers. Qi Xiaoyuan opened Xiaobao's letter first, and his mood healed in a flash. Then he looked at Xiao's letter, and suddenly he was angry and laughed, this brat thinks beautifully. At this moment, Qi Xiaoyuan was in the mood to study his first letter carefully, and it was even more funny to read his last sentence. Although he had never seen the sea, he knew how vast and boundless the sea was, and his tears could be as large as sea water. Where did these tears hide? Qi Xiaoyuan was in a better mood, but seriously thought of his second son's proposal. With a concubine like Zhao concubine, it might be better for him to stay in Guangzhou, and Heiran will not stay in Guangzhou for a few years. Bring it back, he will be older by then, and move directly into the prince's palace, and concubine Zhao will have less influence on him. Qi Xiaoyuan knocked on the table, but he was unwilling to agree to him so easily. Brat, how dare he not want to be his son? At this time, Xiaobao finally knew why his father would ask such a question. He looked at his younger brother speechlessly, and said, Why did you write such a letter without asking us? Qi Wensu said ignorantly, I asked brother Xiaoan and them, and I wrote it according to their opinions. Xiaobao glared at the three children. Xiaoan and the others didn't know the content of the letter, but felt that their guidance was correct, so they shouted confidently, if he has a request, he must tell the adults, or else his wish will be fulfilled like this. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1018. Xiaobao couldn't help stomping his feet. What kind of bad idea are you guys coming up with? How can you ask someone to change your father? My father is so sad. Now Chang Sangxiao's eyes widened. When did we call him Chang Dad? Qi Wensu asked Xiaobao worriedly, is the father really sad? Xiaobao nodded earnestly, and pulled his younger brother to write a letter to comfort his father, while the third youngest pulled the second prince to tell him to renege on the letter. We didn't ask you to change your father, don't wrong us. Chirping and screaming into a mess. Little Xiong stood outside and opened his mouth to watch, and couldn't help shouting, stop arguing, calm down and explain everything clearly. The 5 people became even more noisy. Xiao Xiang had no choice but to yell, and pulled the people away one by one with each hand. Then the 5 people calmed down and looked at him blankly. Little Bear said seriously, "It's almost time to go to bed, let's talk about one by one, otherwise there will be no more noise, and I won't have to sleep tonight." Xiao Bao took a look at San Xiao, and said first, "Then I'll say it first." He looked at his younger brother seriously and said, "Father was sad, and asked me if I also wanted my 4th uncle to be my father, and don't let him go. I have to write a letter to comfort my father immediately." The tiger head jumped up, "You really want to rob my father? Didn't you tell you that you can't do it?" Xiao Xiang slapped him down and said, "First settle brother Xiaobao's affairs, then talk about yours, please be quiet." It was the first time for Xiao Xiang to preside over so many brothers' disputes. He was faintly excited and merciless in his attack. The tiger's head was restrained by him, and he could only stand aside with a pair of big round eyes. The restless little lion and Xiaoan also be honest. Satisfied seeing this, Xiaobao took his younger brother Xiaozai to tell him with reason how much his father loves them, and they should also love his father. Qi Wensu tilted his head and said, "I love father, will father let me stay in Guangzhou?" "Xiaobao, why do you have to stay in Guangzhou? Isn't it good to go back to Beijing with me? I will play with you, and father will also care about you." Qi Wensu looked down at his toes, and said in a low voice, "But I don't want to be locked up in the study by my concubine to practice calligraphy. I want to study with Brother Hudu and the others, and I don't want to go to the royal garden alone. I want to be with Hudu." My brother and the others went to the beach and the street to play together, and my father was so busy that I only had time to talk to me at dinner, but here, my 4th aunt would always watch me, so that no one would bully me, and someone would show me face. I can also sue my uncle and aunt." Qi Wensu took a careful look at his elder brother, and said even more carefully, "Besides, I can do whatever I want here, unlike in the palace, where I eat 2 extra pieces of dim sum, and the maid will remove the plate of dim sum, and then it will be fine, won't be making that dim sum again for a long time." Xiaobao was taken aback for a moment, he really didn't know these things. Qi Wensu pursed his lips and looked at him pitifully. Xiaobao felt distressed, hesitated for a long time and said, "But if you don't go home, father will miss you." Hudu heard that Qi Wensu didn't have to eat snacks, and he immediately felt sympathetic. He is a standard foodie, and he can't eat less if anything is missing in this world. He immediately put the original question aside, and happily gave him an idea. "You draw your portrait for Uncle Huang, and then write what you want to say to Uncle Huang, just like being by Uncle Huang's side." The little lion nodded, then felt something was wrong, and said, "Brother, isn't what we're going to talk about our cousin robbing our father?" Hudu immediately changed his mouth, "Although I sympathize with you, I can't give you my father." The little lion nodded fiercely. Xiaoan pushed the 2 away from the left and the right, and said, "Wensu will definitely not be able to snatch 4th uncle away. The most important thing for us now is to let Uncle Huang keep Wendi, and we will talk about other things later." The little lion and the tiger head got together to discuss for a long time, and reluctantly agreed to a settlement, and asked Xiaoan, "Do you have any good suggestions?" Hudu stretched out his hand to pull the stunned Qi Wensu in, and the 4 little heads got together, and Xiao Xiang and Xiaobao opened their mouths wide. "Are they excluded?" Xiao Xiang glanced at Xiaobao, and said seriously, "Actually, it's not bad for Wendi to stay here. You see, they are about the same age. When troubles arise, one more person can share the responsibility." Xiao Bao twitched the corner of his mouth, squinted at him, and said, "I'm afraid you have an extra person who is responsible for it." Little Bear chuckled and gave him a look that everyone knows. The 4 children frantically wrote to Qi Ziyuan. At the beginning, Qi Ziyuan only wanted to hang his son for a few days and agreed. Seeing that the 4 boys frequently tried to curry favor with him, he decided to watch the fun and let the 4 children toss. It was not until 3 days before they were about to leave that they let Chi Wensu stay in Guangzhou. The 4 children cheered for a while, and packed his luggage in order again overnight. Hutu also warmly invited Chi Wensu to sleep in a room with him, and Mu Yangling slapped him away. Hutu, the boy, sleeps like a fight. Yes, she was choked up after sleeping, let alone Chi Wendi. The last time the 2 children slept together, Wensu was kicked out of bed 3 times in one night. The first 2 times, he was able to crawl back to the bed in a daze. For the 3rd time, she simply wrapped herself in a quilt and lay on the ground. The girl on duty at night couldn't laugh or cry, so she could only work together to hug him to the soft couch to sleep. Mu Yangling didn't dare to let Hutu bring Chi Wensu to sleep again, but Chi Wensu liked being with Hutu very much, and took Hutu's little hand to mix with him to his room, never going back to his own room. Mu Yangling had no choice but to ask the girl on duty to pay attention. If the second prince was kicked out of bed again, he would be hugged to sleep on a soft couch. The girls responded with a smile. There are still 3 days left, and Xiaobao begins to bid farewell to the little friends here, first the little friends in the fishing village, then the children he met in Guangdong official circles, and then the Zhouao brothers. Brother Zhouao heard that little treasure was going back to the capital, and they were both reluctant and envious. They were left in Guangzhou the last time the mission came to Beijing, so they have never been to the capital. I heard that the capital is more prosperous and beautiful than Guangzhou, and the foreigners, the procedures to go out of the city are heavy. Strictly speaking, foreigners can only stay in the treaty ports, which is why no foreigners have been seen in the mainland, and only a few foreigners can go to the prosperous south of the Yangtze River like the capital. During this period of time, Zhouao also learned a lot of Chinese characters and Chinese from Mr. Qian, and he really wanted to go around, so he tentatively asked Xiaobao to come to Beijing with him. Xiaobao was silent for a while and agreed. Hearing this, Qi Heiran couldn't help calling him to him and asking, although a ruler doesn't care about trifles, these foreigners are barbarians after all, so they shouldn't have too many contacts. Xiaobao thought for a while, and said, "Fourth uncle, I promised Zhouao and them not just because they are my friends, I believe that everyone in the world is brothers, and I also believe that people who are not of my race must have different hearts. It's not as simple as what we see, and their envoys are so unfriendly to us, so I think we should take precautions before it happens." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1019. What does this have to do with Zhouao and the others? Qi Heiran didn't think that the Zhouao brothers could affect the overall situation. After all, they themselves were driven here by their stepmother, and they were only viscounts, so what's the use? Xiaobao said, "Fourth uncle, the customs of foreigners are different from ours. England and France are at war not only because the French emperor robbed a few British businessmen. Zhouao said that the English king wanted to be the emperor of France. It is the grandson of a certain king of France. The reason why he is said to be someone is because after the death of that king of France, 4 descendants of the Capet family successively succeeded to the throne, because after the 4th emperor, the Capet family has no direct descendants. Therefore, the son of the Count of Valois, a collateral family, should inherit the throne, so the French dynasty is now called the Valois dynasty." Qi Heiran was confused when he heard that, but the same question remained, what does this have to do with Zhouao? Mu Yangling, who was peeling chestnuts at the side, was stunned, understood, and excitedly said to Qi Heiran, "I understand, Xiaobao wants Zhouao to fight for the throne." Qi Heiran almost vomited blood. Isn't Zhouao from Portugal, is he from England or France? Mu Yangling was elated, but she knew about this famous European history. After all, it involved the 100 Years' War between Britain and France, which was listed in history textbooks. Moreover, because she was looking down from the top of history, she was very concerned about this. The grasp of this period of history is much deeper than that of Xiaobao. She took over Xiaobao and Qi Heiran to explain, for Westerners, as long as they have blood, they are eligible to compete for the throne. For example, the King of England, he is the grandson of Philip IV. He will be able to nominate to compete for the throne of France. Think about how many emperors have passed in the middle, the 4 born in the first line, and now 2 more have passed. The King of England is still fighting with France to become the Emperor of France. Qi Heiran curled his lips. Isn't he the Emperor of England? Why do you still want to be the King of France and merge the 2 countries into one? Mu Yangling shook his head. It is still governed separately. Among foreigners, it is common for one person to serve as emperor of 2 countries or 3 countries. Bloodline is one level, and the appointment of the current king is also one level. For example, the younger brother of the current king of France, the Queen of Naples, was appointed as the heir, and the reason was that the queen was dissatisfied with the heir chosen by the dynasty, and the younger brother of the French king had a little blood relationship with Naples, but their continent had always been married to each other, and almost everyone in the upper class, they all have the blood of several countries, such as the João brothers. They are not only a branch of the Portuguese royal family, but also have the blood of the English royal family. Xiaobao nodded fiercely. Not only that, their grandmother is of the royal blood of the Kingdom of Sicily, and the Kingdom of Sicily is of the same bloodline as Naples. In terms of blood, João is more bloody than the younger brother of the French king. Righteousness. Qi Heiran opened his mouth wide. You mean that João is also qualified to inherit the throne? Xiaobao nodded solemnly. So thank the Westerners for their succession system. They are just fighting so badly between brothers, let alone their cousins, and people who are related by blood from some corner are eligible to compete with them for the throne. I don't know how miserable this struggle is. Xiaobao's thoughts are very simple: make friends with João, even train him, let him kiss Daki and Han people, and then send him back to the country to fight for the title, fight for the throne. If they win, everyone will be happy. Even if they can't win, they can also making the foreign country more chaotic will only benefit them and not harm them. Who made them harbor evil intentions towards Daki? Qi Heiran looked at Xiaobao speechless. Is it really okay for this child to be so cruel before he is 10 years old? Mu Yangling was very excited. She felt that it was a child they had spent a lot of effort to cultivate. She just dared to think and do it. Although she thought he would not succeed, she still supported him as always. It would cost too much, just let him learn some knowledge about handling government affairs from Xiaobao. Qi Heiran rubbed his forehead and said, okay, I understand. You tell fourth uncle to slow down, I am dizzy now. Xiaobao stepped back. As long as you have blood, you can fight for the throne. So if I let a Han woman marry João and give birth to a child with blood from all sides, wouldn't he also have the right to fight for the throne? Mu Yangling froze and looked at Qi Heiran in surprise. Qi Heiran touched his chin and said, João's blood is too far away. Maybe I should choose a foreigner with a closer blood, then send him a woman first, and bring her back to China when she becomes pregnant, raise her up and train her well, then send them back to fight for the throne, and grow up in Daki. How could this heart be closer to Daki than real foreigners like João? Mu Yangling gave Qi Heiran a thumbs up. Excellent, but why do people give you the throne to a half-breed? Don't take João and the others as an example. They all look the same, and the relationship between those countries is similar to that of the Fan Kingdom in the spring and autumn and warring states periods. They are related to each other, they are not of mixed blood, and they must have other sons, but the power of those sons is on that continent, no stronger than the sea that is so far away from us. João is still a native of Europe. It's his advantage. Qi Heiran said, then what if he only has such a son? Mu Yangling. Qi Heiran shook his hands, lay down on the bed and said, my lord, I just said it casually. I asked Joda that the land boundary of foreigners is not as good as ours. What should I do to calculate their throne? Just do it like this, as Xiaoan said, first bury some nails. If those foreigners really want to plot against us Daki, we will use these nails alive and let them mess up the foreigner's country. The meaning is to prevent problems before they happen. If the other party moves, they will move. If the other party does not move, both sides will be safe. But is this possible? Foreigners are not greedy for Daki's resources, and are forced by the currency deficit, so they will definitely attack Daki. Aren't they ready to move now? However, Mu Yangling didn't express her opinions this time. She felt that Chihayran and Xiaobeo's arrangement was very good. If she were here, she might not be able to do better than them. Then you agreed to let Joao and the others go to the capital. Well, the master will invite them a special teacher. Before they followed the tiger head, they just simply recognized some Chinese characters. This time, I will ask the teacher to teach them the textbook seriously. Let's start with the Sanzi Ijing. Mu Yangling twitched his lips and said, foreigners can read Daki's books, so Daki has no secrets in front of foreigners. Should we also send people to learn from foreigners? Chihayran frowned, it's so far away, who would be willing to leave their hometown to go to foreigners? Besides, what can we learn from foreigners? Can you make those cannons of foreigners? Chihayran snorted and said proudly, the people in the workshop came back and forth, saying that the cannon has been researched almost, and within 3 or 2 months, I will be able to see the new cannon. Aling, you just underestimate us. Cheese craftsman, as long as we have money, one day we will be able to produce better cannons than foreigners. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1020. Mu Yangling didn't expect the progress to be so fast. He was taken aback, and then became happy. If Dachi can surpass the Western countries in firearms, then Dachi will hardly lag behind. Mu Yangling thought for a while and said, let Joda take some craftsmen to study in the West. Although we are not afraid of them, wouldn't it be better if we could always be at the forefront of them? Chihayran curled his lips, it's up to you, as long as you can find a craftsman who is willing to go. It's not a desperado, and there is no interest in splashing the sky, who would go to the West to suffer. It's better to stay in Daki and learn from master craftsmen, and then hone the skills by yourself. But seeing his wife so happy, Chihayran didn't pour cold water on her. Central Beijing sent a team of imperial guards to escort Xiaobeo. Chihayran also gave Xiaobeo some people to serve him personally, plus the hidden guards who followed him. It can be said that he protected him like an iron bucket, unless he encountered a large group of rebels, otherwise he will be fine. Brother Joao couldn't help being speechless when they saw this, and felt that the trip was more grand than their king's, so they couldn't help but wonder, isn't Xiaobao the nephew of King Rong, why is he more grand than King Rong? This question continued all the way to the capital. Joao's eyes widened in surprise, are you the crown prince of Daki? Xiaobao nodded and said with a smile, I'm going to the palace to pay my respects now, I can't accompany you anymore. I have asked someone to inform the steward of the palace who is staying in the capital, he will arrange your residence. Don't worry, my fourth uncle will take care of everything after the arrangement is made. I will come out to see you when I finish dealing with the matter at hand. Joao breathed a sigh of relief and sent Xiaobeo away. When Xiaobeo returned to the palace, the happiest thing was his gentleman. They finally didn't have to hold their heads up and pretend that the prince was going to school seriously in the East Palace. As for the prince who left the palace, several gentlemen had already secretly slapped down a piece of homework, just waiting for him to come back. Fang Ziwen also knew that the first person the prince would meet when he returned to the palace must be the emperor, so he tactfully brought a few. It is considered a holiday for the prince when his colleagues go out of the palace. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, who was on vacation, rushed all the way into the imperial study room. When he saw his father, he couldn't help rushing up to hug him. Father, my son is back. Qi Ziyuan, who was still grimacing, couldn't help but calm down, but still said with a straight face, you know you're back. I thought you wanted to stay outside for the rest of your life. Xiaobeo's eyes turned red, and his big head arched in his father's arms. Qi Xiaoyuan couldn't hold back any longer, pinched his arm, and patted his head lightly. You just said you wouldn't make your father sad with your front foot, but you stabbed your father in the heart with your back foot. I haven't found it yet. You settle the score, you cry first. Xiao Bao's eyes were red, and he said in a low voice, I didn't know what was wrong at the time, but I felt so bored in the palace that I couldn't stay there for a quarter of an hour, so I wanted to run outside. Have you ever regretted it? Xiao Bao lowered his head. If the son was alone, he would regret it and turn around, but I brought my second brother with me, so I can't give him the impression of being cowardly and irresponsible. Qi Xiaoyuan's hands were itchy. Is it a responsibility to take my brother all the way to the dark? Xiaobao looked at his father firmly. I don't know, but if you come back halfway, you must be a coward if you retreat when you are in trouble. Qi Xiaoyuan couldn't speak, and didn't know whether to be relieved or angry. He sighed and patted his head after a long time. Okay, let's go see your mother. She hasn't been able to eat or sleep well during this time. Li Jinghua had been waiting at the gate of Cunning Palace. Her eyes turned red when she saw her son and husband approaching from a distance. Wen Kui hurriedly supported her. Mother. Li Jinghua held Wen Kui's hand tightly, so as not to lose her composure. During this time, she has been tense, comforting Qi Xiaoyuan, laughing in front of the concubine, and dignified when meeting the wife. But isn't she worried? No, she was more worried than everyone else, not only worried about their father-son relationship, but even more worried about her son's safety. Qi Xiaoyuan had 4 sons, but she only had 1 son. If something happened to Xiaobao, she might not be able to survive, so looking at her healthy son, Li Jinghua couldn't suppress her emotions for a moment. Xiaobao is full of dependence on his father, but he is a little ashamed when he is on his mother. He knows that he is the support of his mother and sister since he was a child, but now he not only fails to protect his mother, but also makes his mother worry about him. Li Jinghua seemed to know what his son was thinking, and after saluting with Qi Xiaoyuan, he took his hand and touched his head and said, just come back, just come back. The family of 3 was reunited. Seeing that the crisis was resolved, Xiaobao happily told them about what he had seen and heard along the way and life in Guangzhou. Li Jinghua asked curiously, didn't you say that you are raising pearls, have they grown? Xiaobao blushed a little. The year is too short to be good for pearls, so we want to open them again at the end of next summer. Qi Xiaoyuan glanced at him, and said, you have invested so much, so don't cry if you can't raise it by then. Xiaobao said confidently, no, we are not short of money now. There are a lot of fish, crabs, lobsters, and other things raised in the sea, and we can also make some money, and our current music box is very easy to sell. Every month it can be divided into 500 or 600 taels of silver. It is higher than his prince's salary. Qi Xiaoyuan saw that he was so happy with only 500 or 600 taels, so he said with a straight face, people are poor and short-sighted, you have been poor for so many years, and your ambition is only this little. This is the first time we can earn so much money so steadily. My son is naturally happy, Xiaobao said with a smile, but my son knows that I can earn more money in the future. Li Jinghua straightened his face and said, Wen Chen, don't forget, you are the crown prince, your vision and ambition should be on government affairs. How can you always focus on money? Xiaobao sat up straight slightly. My queen, I know, but money is indispensable for everything in the court, and the household department is still the top priority of the 6th department. Qi Xiaoyuan glanced at him, and said, then when you reach the age of 12, go to the Ministry of Household Affairs to observe the government first, and you go to all the 6 departments. Xiaobao became excited and said with great interest, Father, I'd better go to the ritual department first, learn the prince's etiquette, and show the other things by the way, so that after the age of 12, I will be able to go to one less department. Qi Xiaoyuan snorted, you're going to be lazy, but he didn't refute, and he agreed. Xiaobao became cheerful. Qi Xiaoyuan looked at his happy little face and sighed. Xiaobao knew that his father thought of his second brother again, just like this when he asked about his second brother in the imperial study. Xiaobao stopped him. Father, don't worry, the second brother is doing well in Guangzhou. If you miss him, let him send you more portraits. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1021. Thinking of the two portraits he received 2 days ago, Qi Xiaoyuan couldn't help but smile. Forget it, don't embarrass your fourth uncle, just show me his painter, don't teach your younger brothers bad, and let me. They were beaten. The second prince said that he wanted to send a portrait to his father, so he immediately searched for a brush to draw a portrait of himself, but he can only write, and let him draw people with several circles together, let alone like him. Even people don't want to. He can only turn to Xiaoan, who is the best learner. Xiaoan has started to learn painting from her husband, but what he draws are objects, and the course has not yet reached figure painting, so he can only fill in the people while watching. Although he can see that it is a person, he definitely cannot see that the person is Qi Wensu, so the 4 children can only go to Mu Yangling. Mu Yangling was also interested in drawing sketches when she was learning to draw maps, but her grades were not satisfactory, but she still enthusiastically asked someone to ask for charcoal and started to draw sketches for them. When Qi Heiran came back, she had already drawn 4 pictures came out, because they resembled the children 5 or 6 times, and they were being praised like stars. This made Qi Heiran, who was left out in the cold, laughed at her, and reviewed her painting from beginning to end. In short, she had no skill and no aesthetic feeling. It was a waste of the word painting, so she asked someone to grind the ink and spread the paper. With a few strokes, Qi Wensu's eyes wide open and the charm of looking at people are outlined. Anyone who looks at that face will know that it is Qi Wensu himself. Is it too similar? Not only the children, but even Mu Yangling exclaimed wow, and looked at Qi Heiran with admiration, who knew that Qi Heiran felt his face turn red, and immediately rolled up the drawing paper and wanted to leave. In his words, yes, his painting is not very good, but he can draw animals to enlighten children. It was only then that Mu Yangling remembered that the picture albums for the children to recognize characters were all drawn by Qi Heiran stroke by stroke. They were so vivid that when they saw a tiger, they would never mistake it for a cat. The 4 children all drew and sent them to Qi Xiaoyuan for a look. Qi Heiran waved his hands again and again. He didn't mind embarrassing himself in front of his wife and children. He knew at a glance that they didn't know how to paint, he just had fun secretly, and he didn't need to embarrass himself in front of his elder brother. He knows that his paintings have always been ranked last since he was in school, and even if they are taken out now, their skills are far inferior to those of some talented people, so they just have fun secretly, no need to tell anyone. Mu Yangling really thinks that Qi Heiran is good at painting, and she is afraid that after 5 years of hard work, she may not be half as good as him, so she thinks that others must think so she insists on coaxing him to paint. The 4 children saw that their mother, 4th aunt, who has always been good, said yes, and they became more and more convinced that their father, 4th uncle, painted well. The 4 pairs of eyes looked at him desperately, and they almost rolled to the ground and begged. Qi Heiran couldn't stand it. With the pressure, I can only write. So Qi Xiaoyuan received a picture of 4 children standing together from Qi Heiran. He didn't think much about it, thinking that Qi Heiran just wanted him to know what his son looked like now, so he looked at the picture seriously. The second prince, who went to the hospital for a long time, found that he was a lot fatter than before, and he knew that he ate well and slept well in Guangzhou, which made him feel sad and at ease. However, if you think this is the end, you are wrong. For the next 5 days, Qi Xiaoyuan will receive a portrait every night, which is a little bit better than the figure painting on the first day, because it is no longer 4 children standing in a row, but their playful pictures, the portrait of 4 children holding mud and running barefoot on the ground chasing, the portrait of 4 children squatting, sitting, or standing shaking their heads and reading, the portrait of 4 children practicing martial arts, etc., the legend of Shen Yun, Qi. Xiaoyuan thinks looking at the portrait, he could imagine how naughty these 4 children are. Their naughty looks seemed to pop out of the painting. It was not that Qi Heiran painted well, but that their charm was accurately captured. Qi Xiaoyuan thought it might be my younger brother has painted the best portrait in his life, so I am a little relieved. He felt that drawing so many portraits was enough, who knew that he received 2 more portraits 2 days ago. Well, this time it was a family portrait, and Qi Xiaoyuan knew that there was nothing wrong with the 2 paintings except for Qi Heiran himself. It's gone, I can't help but write to ask what you are doing. Who knows that the next night he received 3 letters of condemnation and 1 letter of self-blame and apology. It turns out that the portrait was sent by 4 children privately. Heiran painted it for him and Mu Yangling to enjoy together, but the 4 children stole the portrait and sent it to him. There is also a family portrait, even Qi Heiran is on it. The reason why I couldn't send it was because Mu Yangling cherished it very much. He wanted to frame the painting and put it in his bedroom to enjoy, so the 4th little one couldn't steal it. Of course they used the key is take. The 3 children condemned him because he shouldn't have written and scolded Qi Heiran, so that they were discovered and beaten up. They stole the painting and sent it to you because you missed us so much, Uncle Huang. I forgot to mention that Qi Xiaoyuan wrote I miss you very much in several letters, and Xiao An's explanation was I miss you very, very, very much. The second prince blamed himself. He felt that the cause of the incident was him, so it seemed to be his fault that they were beaten up, and it seemed that it was his fault that the father was blamed by the 3 younger brothers. When Qi Xiaoyuan got the letter, although he knew it shouldn't be, he still laughed heartily 3 times, and then strictly ordered Qi Heiran not to beat up the 4 children because of it. He didn't receive any more portraits in the past 2 days, and he said in his heart that he was more fortunate or more disappointed. So when Xiaobao mentioned it, Qi Xiaoyuan smiled and felt a little disappointed. No matter how similar this painting is, it's not as good as a real person. Qi Xiaoyuan turned to Li Jinghua and said, although Heiran and his siblings will not treat Xiao Er badly, they still have to send him the things that are due to him. By the way, just ask him, if there is anything missing, buy it and send it to him. Don't worry, Your Majesty, I asked Wen Chen to ask Wen Su to prepare it for him, and it happened to be sent there with the New Year's goods. Qi Xiaoyuan nodded, let it be over. No one mentioned concubine Zhao. The emperor and Xiaobao could forget concubine Zhao, but the queen couldn't forget concubine Zhao, and the emperor found an excuse to confine concubine Zhao, but she couldn't always confine her feet, and the matter of the second prince had to be revealed, so I had to tell her about it, otherwise, she won't look good when she makes a fuss. The queen thought about it and went to see concubine Zhao in person. Half a year of confinement made concubine Zhao very weak. Seeing the queen, she was afraid and hated, but she couldn't help but knelt deeply and saluted. Li Jinghua sighed and asked someone to help her up. She pitied concubine Zhao, but she would not sympathize with her. After all, although she was pitiful, she wanted to deal with her son at the beginning. The queen considered it for a while and said, concubine Zhao, the emperor thinks that the second prince staying in the palace is not good for his growth, so he is going to be sent to Guangzhou to be raised by the king of Rongjun and the princess. I saw the second prince. Concubine Zhao was taken aback for a moment, and stared blankly at the queen, as if she didn't understand what she said. Wen Kui, who was waiting behind the queen, twitched the corner of her mouth. Did the empress do it on purpose? To tell the other party this kind of thing so directly like a princess, with concubine Zhao's temperament, I'm afraid she will go crazy. The reborn wife is farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1022. Concubine Zhao was indeed going crazy with anger. After she understood the meaning of the queen's words, her face twisted. Although she wanted to pounce on her, the constant grounding for more than half a year made her understand how small she was in the harem. He could only stare at the queen with blood-quenching eyes. The queen looked at her quietly for a while, and said, "You know how King Rong is. Wen Su is his nephew, and he will teach her well, don't worry." "Don't worry." Concubine Zhao pinched her fingers fiercely in the palm of her hand, looked at Li Jinghua viciously, and said, "If your son is sent away, will you be relieved? I want to see the emperor, I want to see my emperor's son. Your confinement is not over yet, you can't go out." Li Jinghua turned around and said, "If my son is sent to King Rong, I will rest assured." Concubine Zhao couldn't help throwing the things out of the room until after the queen left, and said with a nervous wry smile, "Of course you don't worry, you naturally don't worry. Who doesn't know that you and Princess Rongjun are good sisters-in-law, who doesn't know that Rongjun the king loves his royal highness the crown prince? What good will my prince fall into their hands? You are afraid that my prince will compete with your son for the position of prince, a bitch who is invincible." Back at Cunning Palace, Wen Kui couldn't help asking, "Why didn't your empress tell her that the second prince wanted to stay with King Rong?" Li Jinghua glanced at her, took a sip of tea, and said, "Don't be troublesome, I don't want a lunatic to come out of the palace. The emperor is kind, it will inevitably hurt the harmony of heaven, and the second prince may not come back without complaints." Wen Kui bowed her head, but still held the injustice for the queen. "Your majesty is too kind, but concubine Zhao has always been in a bad mood, and she almost killed his highness the crown prince." The queen put the teacup on the table heavily, and looked at her for a while, thinking that she has been serving her since she was a child, and it is understandable that her heart is all for her own sake. She sighed, "How is Zhao concubine her? How should we act according to our heart? I know that this palace has never been a clean place, but if the emperor stands upright, I can't let the whole harem become a dirty place. It's not like a human being, and you've lowered your own worth too much. What's more, the second prince took the initiative to stay in Guangzhou. I don't care whether he is ignorant of his own heart or deliberately. In short, he cherishes the brotherhood with the prince. I can't destroy it. No matter how concubine Zhao is not, she is also the second prince, the prince's biological mother. We can hit her, make her depressed, and make her panic, but we can't make her lose her mind, lose hope of living, and make her a lunatic. How will Xiaobao deal with the second prince when he returns to the palace?" Seeing Wen Kui lower her head, the queen continued, "I know you are complaining for me, but there is no need for it. The emperor is on my side, and all grievances are not grievances." The queen smiled slightly when she said this, and a soft light flashed on her face, "Speaking of which, I am also lucky. Who can have such a blessing for the queens of all generations?" Thinking of the emperor's love and respect for the empress, Wen Kui also smiled, bowed her knees and saluted. "It's because the servant girl is thinking about it. She always thinks that the empress should not be wronged, but she forgot about the emperor." The queen waved her hand, "This matter is enough for concubine Zhao to bear. Those who restrain the harem will never allow such things as deduction of sex." Wen Kui agreed, and stepped back respectfully to make arrangements. Concubine Zhao has always been pretentious since she gave birth to the second prince. When she walks, she keeps her head up high. Even if she has been grounded for a long time, she always believes that as long as she comes out, she will have a chance to make a comeback. As long as the second prince is here, everything is possible. But now that the second prince is being sent to Guangzhou, it is considered to be the end of her mind. It is impossible for a prince who did not grow up in the palace to inherit the throne. Even if he cannot get the emperor's love and affection, how can he talk about inheriting the throne? And concubine Zhao's natal family is not obvious, and her father is only a fourth-rank magistrate now. Compared with the empress who came from a family, she can hardly be mentioned, so she doesn't help the second prince much. She also worried that her son would be raised and disabled in Guangzhou, and even his life safety. Naturally, she didn't have time to make troubles under the anxiety and panic, which was what Li Jinghua meant. But it would be different if she was told that it was the second prince who voluntarily went to Guangzhou, which undoubtedly told her that even the second prince had given up on her. Concubine Zhao may have a big heart and let her son fight for the throne for her own vanity, glory, and wealth, but she also has plans to be the second prince. In the harem, the son is the support of a woman. Tell her that even her son has given up on her, no doubt it was to force her to die. If she hadn't died, she would have hated the second prince too. I'm afraid there would be no possibility of repairing the relationship between mother and son. Regardless of the former or the latter, neither Li Jinghua nor Xiaobao could face him after the second prince returned to the palace. So Li Jinghua told her that it was the emperor who wanted to send the second prince to Guangzhou, not that the second prince wanted to stay in Guangzhou. The emperor and her were responsible for the blame, at least their mother-child relationship was preserved. Concubine Zhao was locked in the palace and didn't know what was going on outside. She only thought that the second prince was having a bad time in Guangzhou, so she would feel sorry for him, but the second prince was still young and was cared by his biological mother, so the unfair treatment he received when he was a child would slow down. Slowly forget, when he returns to the palace, the relationship between mother and son will only get better. The most important thing was that the second prince had grown up at that time, he could move out of concubine Zhao's palace, and he had his own thoughts, so he would no longer be at her mercy. Even if she still wanted to fight for the position, it would depend on whether the second prince was willing or not. Li Jinghua is willing to leave a ray of life and a ray of hope for them, and also leave a piece of paradise for herself. Concubine Zhao was indeed panicked, but she didn't dare to quarrel like before. She thought that the emperor sent the second prince to Guangzhou because of her disobedience. At this time, she regretted it very much. Even if she wanted to fight for the throne, she shouldn't leaking her whereabouts so quickly made the queen catch her and punish her, but ended up killing the second prince. Concubine Zhao cried for 2 days, but she didn't dare to send news to the outside world to stir everyone's nerves. She could only copy scriptures and chant Buddhist scriptures while worrying, hoping that God would bless the second prince's safety. The queen felt relieved when she saw this, and called Xiaobao over, saying, "Now concubine Zhao knows about your second brother's going to Guangzhou, and she is in a state of panic. You write a letter to your second brother and ask him to send a letter or some the things come back, let Zhao concubine feel at ease, and what Zhao concubine knows is that your brother has just set off, this is the trouble of the two of you brothers, find a way to make this panic go away." Xiaobao stuck out his tongue and wrote a letter to his brother when he got back. The second prince's whole face was wrinkled when he received the letter. The elder brother said that they should not be exposed about their smuggling out of Beijing, otherwise they would all be arrested and beaten. The current situation is that he and brother prince in the past few months, I have been studying with the Tafas in the East Palace, and the 2 cousins of Anlhao's family are in Guangzhou. Now the cousins have returned to Beijing, and the prince's elder brother has also come out of the East Palace to start studying with his father. Government affairs, he was sent to Guangzhou to live with his 4th uncle. Based on the time, he should have just set off now. The second prince scratched his head, not knowing how to write this letter. He couldn't tell the mother and concubine that he was very happy playing with the Hutu brothers every day, right? The second prince could only take the letter to ask his cousins for advice.